One of the unique strengths of being an independent brand is that you can leverage your ability to curate your range of products and foster that personalized shopping experience, which is vastly different to the mass market approach of the big box retailers. And so that's a benefit, but it's also kind of a curse. How do you know exactly what your customers want to buy? Well, seasoned retail buyer and founder of the Babel Fair Showroom, Erica Kiang, is here to give you tips on not just how to choose the right products to buy, but if you're a product brand, how to get those products into stores. Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast, where we talk all about ways to make more money in your retail or e-commerce store. Erica, so
Hi,
glad to
how
have
are
you
you?
here.
Thank you for having me.
No problems. You have so much experience. Like, oh my gosh, you guys listening, it is very rare, I think, to be able to get the knowledge and insight of somebody who has been in the industry for so long and looks so young, I have to say. Like, you look fabulous. And the fact that you're willing to share all of this. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course, I'm very excited to join you.
All right. How did you get into fashion?
Okay, so I've always been in fashion since a young age. I always worked retail stores. In college, I did a lot of various internships from luxury places like Gucci merchandising. I did men's PR, Vogue editorial. And so during my college years, I really experimented with all the different sides of the fashion industry. And I learned that I loved the business of fashion, so merchandising and buying. So I went on to become a corporate merchandiser for Ann Taylor. And then after that, I opened up retail stores and then the showroom.
Okay. I have to ask you if you can please define the word merchandising, because it's a really weird term that can have two different meanings. So for some people, it means visual merchandising. But then from a planning perspective, it could mean product assortment and product mix and product buying. So which part of the merchandising were you?
Yes, that's a really good question because it is a tricky term and not a lot of people know exactly what it means. For me, it has to do, for my particular job, it had to do with buying. So usually for a vertical retailer like Ann Taylor Loft, they call their buyers merchandisers. But essentially, we're the main component of a cross-functional team. So we work with our designers, production, product development, planning, and we're the centralized person organizing all of those different parts of the team in order to get the assortment into stores.
So that means that would have really set you up to work out what are the best products to buy.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. I have so many questions for you, and I want to know how you took that and put it into your retail stores and why you even opened retail stores. But let's just start right at the beginning, which is like, what were the key foundations that you learned as a merchandiser buying for big chains?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. Because Ann Taylor Loft also is not my personal, I would say, style.
I'm going to say no. Like, you were probably the best dressed person when I saw you at an event recently. And that is, you did not buy that at Ann Taylor.
Yeah. And so it really taught me that you can be a good buyer no matter what you're buying for. It doesn't really matter if you personally like that brand or would wear it. It's really getting into the mind and psychology of being a good buyer. So for me, what I learned, and this was my first real job out of college, which was to be customer obsessed. And so, I had a lot of meetings with marketing. We did a lot of brand customer research, persona research, developing, what our customer was actually a teacher in her 30s, might have one kid, and so all of that really contributed to how she bought, what she bought, when she bought. So I love doing the store visits where we got to interact with customers. And so that really paved the road for me of how to be a good buyer.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So understanding the customer persona. So who is the person that is generically going to be buying our product? But you said that you even went into stores and asked the customers, because I personally think if you have a bricks and mortar store, this is a freaking superpower that not enough people leverage. They do not understand that just having conversations with customers puts them so far ahead of an online business.
Yes. And I remember when I went, we thought, sometimes you do stuff in merchandising or corporate because you're so far away from the tactical product. We're just doing things to fill a hole, right? So, like, one was we were doing corduroy pants and we needed color because obviously the colors that sell are like black and brown. And I think the color was purple of the time, but like a bright purple. And so when we went to the store, we were like, this actually looks so terrible. Like at the time, it just wasn't moving at all. And so it's like sometimes you make these decisions so far away from the actual products that when you go see it and feel it, and you're like, yeah, no one in the store is touching this. So yeah, it really helped to have that like real life experience.
And were you actually talking to the customers? And if you were, what were you like? What kind of questions were you asking? Were you telling them that you were like doing market research, or like just walk me through that process?
Yeah, that we were really excited, and so were the customers. We'd be like, we're from corporate, and they were so excited to kind of tell us what they thought. And so we had a lot of fun. Women were trying things on, which was great to see fit because that kind of gets lost sometimes. Obviously, we have a tech fit designer, but just seeing things on and learning where women were wearing these clothes, learning that a lot of the women were teachers or nurses. And so you have to kind of think about how do these clothes play into her particular lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. And so were those the kinds of the questions you were asking? Like, obviously, you were asking questions about, do you like the fit? Do you like the colors? Why do you shop here? Things like that. But I guess what were you looking for in terms of, oh, that's something that we hadn't, like, is there anything that comes to mind that someone might have said to you where like, oh, that's really important and we didn't think about that?
Yeah, it was so long ago. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I do think that I think what was interesting was just seeing the actual like demographic of the customer. I think, corporate thinks they might be a little bit younger. They probably skewed a little bit older, which also kind of helped us assess like exactly who was buying the product. And honestly, we got a lot of really good feedback from the employees. Like they were really excited to tell us like, their thought because they're there every day. So like they're like, no one touches this, and again, it might be a color or like a fit or something like that. But they had a lot of insight. And I think it was great to kind of connect with people who are there every single day.
Yeah, I love that. Do you happen to remember whether when you were in Ann Taylor, you were thinking, oh my God, this is a little bit different to the Gucci customer?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, the Gucci customer, like, I was working in the jewelry department, and I mean, it wasn't a very busy department for whatever reason. So, you know, and we would know one customer, literally. That's how Gucci, they know they're like 10 customers that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it was a lot more personal. Whereas, you're catering towards like a certain very small group of people. And and Taylor, you're dealing with a totally different type of customer for sure. Much more commercial, obviously, much more accessible price point. So, yeah.
And that's really interesting. That's kind of the perfect segue to the next part that I wanted to talk to you about is being able, as an independent business or an independent brand, really being able to leverage the fact that you're almost in the Gucci realm in terms of customer association, probably not in price point, but that unique ability to be able to really understand who your customer is, because most of the people who are listening are either still in the trenches dealing with customers or are still working in their business as well as on their business. So you might be doing seven figures, but you still have enough fingers in enough pies to be seeing those customer complaints or to be able to hear those, what people are saying. And so thinking back to that customer experience, the customer journey, were there any key, key moments or key highlights or key learnings that you think is really important for people that are listening to be taking on board, because they do have that ability to know their customers more like Gucci? Oh, I think we just found the title for this episode. It's like, know your customers like Gucci. As opposed to, the big chain stores, because big chain stores are looking for mass appeal. They're trying to appeal to hundreds of thousands of people, not thousands of people.
Right. Sorry. So you mean as an independent brand?
Yeah, yeah. Like what are those key takeaways that you learn in from the difference between Gucci and the difference between Ann Taylor Loft that people listening could be leveraging? I'm always looking for like the hacks that the big brands do that we can insert into our businesses.
Yeah, I think Gucci, they obviously have a special exclusivity. And I think that, a lot of brands can leverage that as something that they offer. When we start to sell an independent brand at the showroom now, because now years later, I have a fashion showroom. So we represent independent and larger brands. But for independent brands, when we launch, a strategy really is to say, like, you could be the first in this territory with this brand. And yeah, and retailers love that because honestly, I think the reason why a shopper would shop with an independent store, right, over like a big box retailer is to have those unique pieces, those unique brands. And if you have territory, which means exclusivity for a certain, square mile radius, then you have a huge benefit because you might not be able to find these products for, maybe not even within states, pretty far. You'd have to order it internationally. So that's a great way to get into a retailer.
I love that. And I think, tell me more about that because what I have found from many of the retailers that we work with is the whole exclusivity is going away. Like brands are just trying to flood the market and get into as many retailers as possible, whether that's big retailers, whether that's independent retailers. Are you finding that the brands that you work with are happy to do exclusivity more often than not?
Yeah, I mean, and they honestly lean on us because I think that when you are exclusive and you maintain that, you actually grow and scale faster because you hand chose, there's a brand Paloma Wool that did this really well, like was very picky about what stores that they sold to. I don't know if they would say they're picky, but that's what I observed. And so I really, like that strategy of being strategic, not just saying yes to any boutique, or any store, but place it. And that's not to say like the status of the store or whatever, but just making sure that your brand aligns with that store. And that's the type of brand that you want to grow. And so, yeah, I see it work really well as a strategy.
And so we're talking about that from both sides of the fence. So if you're a store going into if a brand approaches you to stock their product and you think it is really well aligned, it's having that, having the audacity or having the backbone to come out and say, well, you know what? I'm prepared to give this a go, but I want exclusivity. But then also from the brand point of view is using that as a leverage point because I know when I had my stores, I would get dozens of products coming in every single day. And you're just there's no what give me a reason to look at this. And it wouldn't matter if it was something physical that turned up. It wouldn't matter if it was a lookbook or, someone it used to drive me insane when people just used to call me. It's like, I have 6 people at my counter. Like,
Yeah.
go away, my friend.
No, 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 no. And I used to, so after Ann Taylor, I opened 2 stores. And so when I was at the stores, I felt the same way. I mean, also in New York City, that's where my stores were. It's very high traffic. So you don't really have, you're like working with the customer. You don't have time to be assessing lines. And then it's awkward, right? Because you don't want to talk about wholesale price in front of customers. But yeah, I don't think that that's the best way to approach a retailer.
Or even worse when they just turn up and then they just sit in the corner or stand in the corner and you're like, I could be hours. Like, go away, my friends. Go away.
Yeah. Or buy something, try something on, right? Like,
Make yourself useful. One of the questions I wanted to ask you just around exclusivity was, is there a world in which I know that you work with a lot of big stores like Nordstrom.
yeah.
Is there a world in which a brand may select specific items to be exclusive to, say, a big box store like Nordstrom, but then have other stores available to independents? Does that happen?
100% happens all the time. And I think, as you said, brands are getting bigger. They want more business, but they don't want to cannibalize. I mean, a brand shouldn't want to cannibalize their own business. So, like, if you sell the same thing to Nordstrom and the same thing to Bloomingdale's, which a lot of brands do, you do want to differentiate at some point. So a lot of brands, including my own, will do exclusives for the larger retailers just so that they have something different. And sometimes even for boutiques, like if they can do 100 of something, we've done it before, And so I think that gives you that point of differentiation where, yes, you have the same brand because brands need to make money, right? They need to sell to retailers. So it makes a lot of sense. But I think one way is like if you Google it and you see all of the same stuff at all the same stores, you're going to just buy the lowest price, of that item. But if that item comes in exclusive color or print for someone, then yeah, they're really driving that interest to their site.
Okay, so you just said something that I found quite fascinating. And I think people who own independent stores, whether it's online or bricks and mortar, if you weren't listening, Erica said something along the lines of doing an exclusive color for a boutique. And then she said 100 units. Can we dig in a little bit more? Because I don't know if you said that offhand, but I think a lot of people listening have maybe wanted to do something like that. And it's never occurred to them that 100 units, like to me, for most people, that's probably completely doable to sell through 100 units. Is that a viable option? I know that I used to do it. I remember that we used to have these candles that we bought, and we had a baby store, but we just used to have a candle because it smelled nice in the store. We had so many people asking for those candles. I actually went to the manufacturer. I had 500 of the damn things made just so that we could sell them. And it was quite remarkable to me that actually the MOQ was only 100. And I'm like, I can sell more than 100 of these, my friend. Just give me 500. And so talk to me about that, about what kind of numbers we should be looking at. And is it different for different kind of verticals? I know that you deal mainly in fashion, but yeah, tell me about that. Spill the tea.
Yeah. So, I mean, each brand has different MOQs. So, we do have brands that have MOQs, which is minimum order quantity in the thousands. So that's something that obviously I would not recommend. But we do have a lot of designers who have an MOQ of 100 pieces and sometimes less, sometimes like 50 or 60. The MOQ really depends on the factory and depends on the brand. And so I really do encourage boutiques to ask because you never know, like what the MOQ is. And it's rare. We actually had a boutique inquire this week about cutting 6 styles, 100 pieces each. I mean, it is higher for a lot of single boutiques where they're buying 6 to maybe 10 units, but it's doable, right? Especially sometimes people have 2 locations. And so I would say if a boutique has a bestseller, and of course we all have that seller, like I remember ordering a dress for my boutique and I just kept getting anything that they had left. I was like, just give it to me. And we probably did sell 100 at the end of the day. So I would say if you have a bestseller that just is selling out like crazy, I would inquire with the brand to see if they can recut it for you.
Wow. And to me, that is like almost the perfect opportunity to go back to that customer engagement. And you're literally building campaigns around, hey, we're going to create this thing. It's a bestseller. We're going to get out on unique color. Do you like green? Do you like this purple? Do you like red? Putting it out to customers. And then, of course, it's a pre-sale opportunity. So I'm always about taking the money beforehand.
No, of course. Yeah, you get a deposit for sure. Wait, that is a good point. I don't think that sometimes boutiques don't leverage as much of that as the majors do. Because obviously the majors can really cut anything because they can sometimes do 300, 500 pieces. So if they want something, they can get it back. But sometimes that's also true for boutiques.
Okay. I found out, I remember this story where a friend of mine was a visual merchandiser, freelance visual merchandiser, and she was doing some visual merchandising in my store. And she just casually mentioned that she'd been doing it for one of the big brands here in Australia and that the brand had paid some ridiculous amount of money, tens of thousands of dollars to be in the window. And I was like, hold up, brands pay to be in the window? Like, what is this? And she goes, oh yeah, if they're in a catalogue, they pay to be in the catalogue. In fact, they'll pay more to be at the front of the catalogue versus the middle of the catalogue, how big the pictures are, they pay to be in the window, they pay for shelf space. If they're I did not know this, my friend. Like, nobody teaches you this stuff. If you're in a big box retailer and the product gets discounted, it's not the big box retailer that's taking the cut. It's the supplier or the manufacturer on the back end who is taking the cut. And that changed my entire concept of business, this throwaway line. And I actually, like, sometimes I think, oh my God, the audacity of you, girl. I actually created, I called it the Windows Media Kit. And I sold space in my shop windows and in my email database. And it was, I think it was $1,000 if you wanted, we had 2 stores that were quite premium in terms of frontage. If you wanted the windows in those 2 stores, I think it was $1,000. And then you also got X number of shout outs on social media and you got email and but they could choose whether they wanted to pay me in cash or pay me in like $1,000 wholesale in product. You know what I wanted? I didn't want the cash. I wanted the $1,000 worth of product because that was $2,000 and it meant my order to them had to be so much smaller. They had to give at least one giveaway. And sometimes I look back and go, and people paid me for this? Like, who the heck was I? And yet we would sell out our windows months in advance.
Wow, that's amazing. I have no, yes, you are right. That's what big box retailers do. I will say you need a good sales agent to negotiate, sometimes not doing, not paying for it, but they definitely try to get advertising dollars for, any marketing opportunity, because when you have that many eyeballs on something, they realize like, yes, you can charge for this. So it's definitely a good way to get additional revenue in for an independent boutique as well.
And then you were just saying something else then, the so many eyeballs. And this is something I think independent stores forget and also brands forget. So independent stores forget to be able to go to a supplier, manufacturer, a brand and say, but we have 200,000 customers a year coming through our store. But then I see a lot of brands go, well, I don't want to be doing wholesale to retailers because that's a cut in my profits. And I'm like, but that's 200,000 people in that one location that are never going to see your product. And I think that independent stores forget to leverage that kind of information, but then brands sometimes forget to appreciate that information.
Yes, I mean, now having the showroom. I've had that for over, 13 years which is also known as an agency. I'm a big proponent of wholesale. I feel like it's a necessary component to scaling a brand. As you said, it gives you a platform for people to try it on. And you mentioned this to me, which I thought was a really, really good insight, that sometimes they're not even buying it from the independent retailer. I hate to say it, but sometimes they are. It just it makes it more visible and you don't know actually where they end up buying it as a brand.
As a brand, yep. And but they're acting as your agent. So every retail store and every online store becomes an agent. And when you just mentioned before about the exclusivity or even just being picky about the options that you have for different stores, I think if you are a brand, that is such a great strategy because it does mean that the stores on the frontline stores have the opportunity to be different in different locations, but it also means that you're not competing against mass market. So you've got this blouse, but then 300 other stores have got it, like you said, and now it's a race to the bottom. And then all that ends up happening is you end up discounting, and then your stores get upset because it's like, well, you didn't offer us a discount. So that idea of you called it picky. I'm going to go with picky as well. Being selective about the product range that you offer to different stores, I think that is a brilliant strategy that way too many brands don't actually employ.
For sure, for sure. And I think, for boutiques, as things are getting more commercial and universal, there's big box websites. I think it's really how you curate your collection and how can you find these independent, cool brands that might not be at other places, because that's what people are really going to come to you for. And, customers know they're like, I go to this boutique and they have these amazing brands that they can't find anywhere else. And I think the assortment is so crucial now, where it used to not be as crucial when there wasn't the shop ops and the revolves and ASOS and all this kind of stuff. But I think it is now so more than ever.
So can I ask you, because you have the showroom side of things, many people who listen will go to a buying fair, whether that's a static buying fair or something like Magic. here in Australia, we have the Reed gift fairs and things like that. How do they find the brands that aren't in those places?
I mean, because I started with, after Ann Taylor, I started with 2 stores called Babel Fair, and then with Babel Fair, I specialize in international brands that were hard to find. And I will say, like, yes, we did a lot of research on the internet, keeping our ear close to the ground, like, constantly finding out what was trendy and cool in other countries. But we did find a lot of gems at trade shows, because a lot of trade shows, especially the big ones, whereas everyone's like, oh, there's nothing cool at Magic. A lot of international brands, for example, only know Magic in the US. So they come and they just do it. And they're like in a weird booth in the back and no one's talking to them. But if you really take the time to walk every single booth and look, you can find gems for sure. I found an amazing Japanese brand at Magic one time that was, I mean, silk dresses that were beautiful, and no one really was picking up because they were just in the wrong section, really hard to find. The show didn't care about them, so they didn't have a great booth. So I would just say some buyers kind of beeline in and out of the show, and you really need to take the time to walk it and spend a few days finding those gems.
So when people are going to something, I mean, it is completely overwhelming. And you just said a few days, and they do go for several days. And I'm
Mhm.
going to say that most of the people I talk are kind of like you. They either have 2 strategies, which is I'm in and out, or I'm going to go the first day and I'm going to do my recon, and then I'm going to go back the second day. What would be your suggestions? Because I love the fact that it's like, go to all those janky booths down the back that, you're thinking, those people are worth nothing. But actually, let's kind of flip that on the head and go, this is an opportunity waiting to happen. But as people are going, we're about to hit peak buying season. Like, if you haven't already bought, you're about to start buying. What are we looking for?
Yeah, I would say at the trade shows, I always spent time. I always booked enough time to walk every single aisle. That might be crazy, but accessories, because clothing brands are mixed in sometimes by accident. And so I was really scouring those trade shows, and I took being a buyer very seriously. That's what I learned at Ann Taylor. Your job is to buy product that your customers are really going to resonate with. And that's not always easy. So I think it's easy to kind of go to the few brands that but you really have to mix in that newness. And I felt like that's what kind of put our store on the map. Yeah, spending a lot of time digging through a lot of different brands at the shows.
So when people are going to buy, should they be analyzing what sold last year, or should they be looking at what's trending? Like, you're in the thick of this right now. What are you seeing? What are you seeing that people are really latching onto, and that the people who are listening, whether they're in fashion or not, can take some advice away?
Yeah, I think there's an unfortunate trend that's happening because business hasn't been great, right? So when business is not great, people stick to what they know and they don't go outside of their matrix. So they're just because and you see this not just in fashion, but you can see that there's so many sequels of movies right now because no one's willing to take a risk on something that's kind of, you know, avant-garde or totally new. And I think that actually kind of hurts you. I think that if you're only sticking to what you know, there's no newness and everything feels very stale. And so, a lot of brands are sticking to the same stuff that they've already done, and retailers are sticking to the same brands that they know. And I will say, obviously, you can do that. Maybe I would keep it though to 80%. And I would say 20%, you're going to stick out if you have that newness, if you have those unique pieces and those unique brands, because I see retailers really get hurt when they're not trying something new.
I think the same too. Like, you have to keep it fresh. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, even whether it's color, whether it's style, whether it's something like accessories, it is
Mhm.
really about finding reasons. And reasons don't have to be discounts, but it's finding reasons to get people to come back to your website, to come back to your store, to come back and look at what is happening. And as we literally, as we're recording this, we're in launch for a boot camp, which is to show people how to make promotions. And I think retailers forget that promotions don't have to be discounts, but you've got to be doing promotions pretty much every week, because a promotion is just an excuse to get people to come back and see what you have. Give them an
Yeah.
excuse to buy something.
Yes. And this is such a simple statement, but one of my brands told me a long time ago, they're like, customers love new. And it's always stuck with me. They love a new brand. They love a new collection. They love a new, like newness is always going to keep it fresh, obviously, and just get people coming back again. You don't want them to come back and then it's the same exact brands, the same stuff that they already saw before, because then they stopped coming back. So it was the same when I had the boutiques. I would just try to, even if it's a small portion of the assortment, just to get something new in.
Yeah, make sure you're changing out those damn windows. Like I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, when was the last time you changed out your window? And she said 3 months ago for the season. I was like,
Oh,
yeah. Oh, exactly.
yeah, you should be changing the window.
Yeah, you were a lot more polite than me. As we go in, you've given us so much information, particularly around buying, but I would love to know, what do you think is considered to be a bestseller?
So a bestseller is how fast it sells and how many units it sells. So sometimes brands or shops will say this is a bestseller and they sold out of it, but it took 8 months, right? So if you sell out of something and it took 8 months, that's not exactly a bestseller. You want to see how long it took you to sell it. So rule of thumb for me is getting kind of hyper specific is usually I plan products when I had a store and at Ann Taylor at 60% full price sell through after 6 weeks. So yeah.
Can we just dig into that? Because
Yeah.
I say nothing after I'm 45 days, but nothing after 90 days. It's got to be gone after 90 days.
Yeah.
But at 45, you should be looking at getting rid of it. Please walk the listeners through, because they've heard it from me, but sometimes they need to hear it from somebody else who has more knowledge and more experience. Walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah. So 60%. So I actually started for 6 months as a planner at Ann Taylor before being a merchandiser, which is actually the planning of the inventory. And so we would always plan at 60% full price sell through after 6 weeks, which means for 6 weeks, you're selling through 10% of that inventory. And then if it was a very solid B plus seller at 6 weeks, you would start to go to markdown with the 40% that was left. We had a little bit of a higher margin, so that was okay. But yeah, we would start the markdown cadence. And I have to say, the other thing that I just said this on my Instagram the other day, but something that I see boutiques not do is mark things down. And it is, yeah. I see you agree.
Yes.
So
If you're watching the video, you see my face. And look, I am always going to be the first person who says, don't discount. But there is a point, which Erica literally just walked you through, at which the product is now costing you money. It is opportunity cost and it is a literal cost. And so
yeah.
Continue, please, discounting.
So as a planner, they were just like, as soon as it's something is a dog, mark it down. You got to get it because we call products dogs when they don't sell, but because it's such a heavy cash business, right? There's a lot of cash in and a lot of cash out, and cash is your lifeblood. So you do not want it tied up into inventory. You just want to recoup, even if you can recoup the cost, which would be great, back and move on to buy something, reorder something, buy something that's trending, make use of that money rather than just have it locked up in this inventory that's not selling. And, I say this because I see a lot of boutiques have things on the ground for like a year. And I'm like, you need to mark it down and just get the money back. I'm like, the money is worth so much more. Yeah. So cut your losses and just mark it down.
I worked out that if you had a product that you sold for $40 and you paid $20 for it, the cost, the lost cost, the opportunity cost of that product after 1 year is literally $1 million.
Yeah, wow.
Because it compounds. So just a quick, It's like, okay, if I sold that today, I have $20, I have $40. I can now buy 2. So after that, I can then take that money and buy 4. And so that just continues to multiply. And you stepping out the 10% per week for the first 6 weeks, So by 6 weeks, we have sold out 60%. And there are going to be so many people listening here going, oh, yes, but we're not a chain store. It doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what kind of store you are. The simple fact is you need to be selling because it is inventory, is cash. It's literally your money locked away.
Yes.
Can you tell us about what happens to the next 40%?
So the next 40% gets marked down in a markdown cadence. And then you start to pull different levers and it gets a little bit more strategic. But, you start with a shallow discount if it's not moving after one. I can't remember exactly the amount of weeks that we did, but you slowly mark things down until they move. Because obviously you don't want to jump to 50% if you don't have to, So, maybe your shallowest discount is 15%. 10% sometimes doesn't do it, but sometimes it does if it's an expensive item. But basically, you start to go down, let's say 15%, 20%, 30%, 40%, but you want to just keep marking it down. I would say, depending on how busy your store is, because it really depends on how many people are seeing this, marking it down every week or two until it is gone. Yeah.
And so when you are working in a big box chain store, at what point is it out? What point does it have to be sold, gotten rid of, written off?
Yeah, that's called kill price. We would do kill price probably after 90 days. It was maybe 60 to 90 days, depending on, it depends on other conditions, but I want to say it was around like 60, 90 days. You don't want that hanging around too much.
No, but it's just money at the end of the day. It's literally your money sitting there staring in your face going, haha, you can't have me.
Yeah. And what I hate seeing is like a basement full of just inventory, when you go to a boutique, because again, I've been there. I had boutiques for 10 years, so I understand. But I think because you mentioned boutiques might be like, oh, I'm not a big box retailer, but honestly, that's how I learned how to run my boutiques. I ran them the same exact way, down to our assortment planning, down to how I planned our dollars. I really stuck to a budget because I noticed that sometimes boutiques don't stick to a sales plan or know what they're buying to, like I had very straightforward. We planned 20% up to last year by month. And then we looked at what our margin was and followed that to get to our cost dollars, so it was very formulaic. And then I usually only bought 85% to that plan and left 15% for chase. So that's exactly how I did it.
And it worked. I mean, at the end of the day, it worked. You've moved on and now you help brands get their products into stores, big stores, independent stores. I think you left the best until last. I think that we're going to have to cut that little bit out and make a great reel on that because the knowledge that you just imparted about sell-through rates, and you did it so well, was probably game-changing for the people listening. And so as we go in, my friends, to the Christmas holiday buying period, I don't want to see any of that stock in January.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want to see it in January. Yeah.
Erica Kiang, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I just can't believe that was bombshell what you just thank you for sharing that.
Great. I had such a great time. Thank you for having me.
So that's a wrap. I'd love to hear what insight you've gotten from this episode and how you're going to put it into action. If you're a social kind of person, follow me at @TheSelena and make sure to leave a comment and let me know. And if this episode made you think a little bit differently or gave you some inspiration or perhaps gave you the kick that you needed to take action, then please take a couple of minutes to leave me a review on your platform of choice. Because the more reviews the show gets, the more independent retail and e-commerce stores just like yours that we can help to scale. And when that happens, it's a win for you, a win for your community, and a win for your customers. I'll see you on the next episode.